Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here on YouTube, and welcome to, of course, episode number 13 of the Nasty Metal Podcast. So how's everyone doing? Well, as far as me, I guess just to get it over with, just to at least to begin the podcast this way, I know a lot of you are probably kind of curious on at least on why there has been a lack in reviews and other sort of episodes. Besides the fact that I'm able to at least crank out the album of the week episodes, but again, what's been lacking is review episodes, and I'm going to be upfront and tell you on why at least explain to you on why there has been a lack, and of course, the minute I explain to you, you'll then understand why. So, where do I completely begin with this? Well, and probably it's probably a decent thing to actually explain now, since it's been 2 weeks. But on February 26th. It wasn't something I really wanted. I think none of us in my family, at least, wanted to at least spend our Friday morning this way, or wake up and spend our Friday evening and night and so on. But my grandma had passed away, so it definitely hit me in the gut for sure. It for sure did, and it obviously, you can tell because of that, it resulted in me not wanting to at least do any review episodes. I mean, I was able to at least do album of the week episodes, but that was all I can do, because of my mind frame was pretty shot in some cases. I had to at least needed at least a couple of weeks to just let my mind at least free itself from the pretty much just the sadness in some cases, and I guess from the slight depression or whatnot. I just needed some time at least away from YouTube, at least from doing reviews and so on, and just needed basically just to give my mind a break and just let all of it at least pass by. So it definitely sucked. It sucks. I was I was still pretty young when I lost, of course, my grandpa 2 decades ago, 2006. I believe it might have been around September time. It was a long time ago, and it definitely, at least now though, at least she's probably with him at least somewhere. Normally I don't get talk about, at least show a little spiritual, at least opinions or whatnot. At least show a little bit of spiritual stuff or whatnot. I don't really get that kind of way here, but obviously, at least right now, I hope she's at least with him there. So it sucked. At least I'm at least happy that I was able to at least to visit her, at least when I was able to. That's why I'm also very pissed off and very just very mad at the whole COVID-19 situation, because of with a lot of our folks, our family members, and who else within the rock and metal world or whatnot. A lot of these legends, and of course our family members, some of them we're not getting any younger. We're getting old. And again, it definitely it's success. It makes us vulnerable and susceptible to at least death. We don't know when someone who you never know on who's going to live long or not. You don't know when's going to be someone's last couple of days. You really don't know. And with her, there was always that kind of real dark cloud hovering, knowing that you never know when's going to be that person's last day. And I'm just mad at COVID-19 that I wasn't able to, at least most of us wasn't able to at least go down, at least visit her a couple of more times before all of that, before she passed. COVID-19 should have never happened. And once again, it's normally I don't want to talk about COVID-19 more. I was trying to be done with talking about fucking COVID-19, but at the same time, I'm absolutely pissed at it still once again because I wasn't able to at least visit some of them, and who knows when. Who knows about when some of this shit's going to at least be over and done with. So, it just sucks. It really does suck. So, I know I need a little, at least 5 minutes here to at least vent. So, I don't want to try and talk too much about this because I don't want to try and make this whole entire Nasty Metal Productions podcast episode be all sobbing and somber and just absolute melancholic or whatnot. I don't want to try and make it completely sad and depressing. But once again, nothing that never fails. So it just sucks. That's all that needs to be said. But at least she's somewhere where she should be. Hopefully with her other family members who have at least been passed and whatnot. All right, so let's get out of that. Let's finally get out of that. So I hope all of that is a good explanation for all of you for why there has been a lack of content on this channel for these past 2 weeks. So I hope that clears that up, and then you'll understand. You probably will be going like, why you didn't really need this to explain anything. We all understand. We all get it. It happens to us sometimes whenever someone passes away in our family. It does somewhat. It definitely hurts us in some sort of way. It does kind of. It does add a little bit of mental pain or whatnot. So, but again, I hope all of you understand. It is. Life is life. There's nothing that you can do about it, but still, at least I'm happy to have at least was able to at least see her one last time, at least last year, even though again it was within June. It's been past June, so of 2020. Still, normally around October time I would have been able to at least go down there, but again, fucking COVID-19. God damn it. Goddamn pandemic. Fuck you, pandemic. Alright, so let's definitely get out of that. Let's get out of that. Let's get into something else to talk about. So, also, that should lead into at least, so what's going to come, at least what's coming to the channel then. I don't know. I really don't know what, I had stuff planned, but by the time I replanned everything, and then by the time I replanned everything, shit changed, and at this point, there really isn't anything as far as reviews set in stone, but there will be reviews, and right now, I don't really feel like, at least, for one, announcing any reviews. I'm just, again, when I feel like what album gets reviewed is what's going to get reviewed, and it will just end up being at least a surprise, whatever. That's all it's going to be. I might announce stuff on Facebook. And you know what? I guess that might lead to at least a small topic here, which is on Facebook and so on. But even though I didn't really feel like talking about that, I probably should mention some of that. But again, I always leave my Facebook page. I always leave a link in the description box. So if you want to at least keep up with what's coming to this channel, you can always go to my Facebook link and check out the page, and always check in there and see what what's coming to the channel, because again, I don't have that feature unlocked for me on the community feature, where I would be able to also announce scheduled content here on YouTube without having to record a video or audio for it. All right, so there you go. So that definitely explains a lot of that. So again, who knows about what's coming to this channel. I'm getting over my slight depression of losing a family member, so I'm over that. So let's definitely get into something else. Let's start lightening up the mood. Before I really get into a Q&A, to the Q&A segment, let's talk about this. This actually broke about a week ago. It, oh boy, it was the, if any of you who keeps up with the media or keeps up with certain channels on YouTube, and if you do go onto YouTube, you get recommendations. If you got this recommendation, it would have popped at you like a damn snake in the ground. It would have bit you. You would have seen it. It would have been a fucking UFO in the sky. You would see it. It was, of course, at least uploaded to the Jeff Nichols Estate YouTube channel. It is a unreleased Dio-era Black Sabbath track that was called Slapback. Yes, you heard that right. Slapback. And it was, at least it was up in the air on whether or not it was a Black Sabbath track, even though Ronnie James Dio is on vocals on the track, and it was recorded at least in 1979. Some were like stating could it have been a Rainbow song, which obviously by 1979 Ronnie James Dio had left fucking Rainbow. I don't think that there was any other recording with, or at least unreleased recordings with him and Rainbow in 1978. I thought Richie Blackmore released a lot of them anyways on those 3 albums from 1979 to 1978. So I don't know why anyone would think that, because of, again, the riff and just the riff and the whole composition sounded to some people more like a Rainbow song or an Elf song than really a Black Sabbath track. But it obviously, from the guitar tone to even the whole, even I have to say, it does have a little bit of a Black Sabbath feel. It really did sound like something more so from like Never Say Die or Technical Ecstasy than something like either The Mob Rules or even in some cases Heaven and Hell. But then again, Walk Away kind of had that kind of Elf feel to it as well. So I don't know why some people really would think anything different, I guess. Some people just, when they think of the Dio-era Black Sabbath, they just think of stuff like Sign of the Southern Cross or Children of the Sea or Die Young and Neon Nights and Heaven and Hell. You know, they would think that, and not really the lighter weight blues tracks that they actually tacked on those 2 albums. So, whatever. Still, it was up in the air on whether or not it was, and some people were wondering, so when is Geezer Butler or Tony Iommi going to at least comment on this? Because again, Ronnie James Dio has since been passed. And another one that was kind of made people a little bit skeptical about it, whether or not it was a Black Sabbath track, is because of this month or so, and the newly, at least the reissued or repressing from Rhino Records for the deluxe editions for Mob Rules and Heaven and Hell are getting released. And there are 2 discs, and they do feature some unreleased material, but it was more so like live versions or whatnot, and so on. That's all. And some people thought then why wasn't it, if this was such a Black Sabbath track, then why wasn't even added on to those as a bonus track on the Mob on Heaven and Hell? I mean, so some people, I guess, were skeptical about that. I mean, if you read the comments, some people were going back and forth. Some said it does sound like a Black Sabbath track, and then some people go, well, it really doesn't. It sounds like this, sounds like so-and-so. So everything just became a convoluted mess in terms of the validity of the track, even though you can tell it was Ronnie James Dio on vocals. So people were definitely wondering, so where's the comments from Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler? Well, just a few days ago, Geezer Butler actually was able to comment on the track, and it was on his show, or at least on his appearance on the Eddie Trunk Nation podcast. Even though it says Trunk Nation with Eddie Trunk, Geezer Butler did appear on that episode, and Eddie Trunk did bring up the track and played it for Geezer, and this was Geezer Butler's comments on the song. Yeah, that was one of the songs that we did before I left. Geezer briefly left the band in 1979. It's probably the reason I did leave. He laughs, of course. It was just one of those songs that didn't make the grade. It was just a one-off thing. We just jammed it and didn't think anything more of it. It didn't really work. So those were his comments. In some cases, he kind of slightly buried the track in some cases, but at the same time, he at least clarified it was a Black Sabbath track, and he also clarified that he played on it. That's until Tony Iommi then went on, who then appeared on Trunk Nation with Eddie Trunk. Right? Yes. Just a day ago. And he commented on the track. Because again, he obviously knew about it. And couldn't wait to talk about it on Trunk Nation with Eddie Trunk. Because he probably knew the topic was going to at least be brought up. So here's what Tony Iommi had to say on the track. Basically, it starts off with saying that he was not happy about the track being released. Again, it's a demo recorded by Ronnie James Dio, fronting Black Sabbath in 1979, which he after them sacking Ozzy Osbourne, or at least it's been said, it was either they sacked Ozzy or Ozzy just left and needed rehab and needed time away from the band. But again, Tony Iommi and co. at least wanted to be able to continue, so they just had to find a replacement, and that's where they found Ronnie James Dio. So he obviously debuted in 1979. So his other words on Tony Iommi's other words on this track is, "It's left a really bad taste in my mouth." Again, that's according to Tony Iommi on the song. So as he goes, again, he expresses that Gary Reese, the stepson and executor of the estate of Black Sabbath's longtime keyboardist Jeff Nichols, also former Quartz member, again, who has been since passed, after Quartz had released their last time, which was like, See No Evil or something it was called, which I did review on this channel when it came out in 2016 through High Roller Records. So again, Gary Reese, of course, being again the son of Jeff Nichols, and again Jeff Nichols ended up after he left after he left Quartz, he joined Black Sabbath. So he did, but again he shared the track on YouTube after discovering it on an old cassette, which again obviously it seemed like that Jeff Nichols was at least was given advanced cassettes or so on of a lot of the material that he at least was on with Black Sabbath. Just the thing is, it's never quite clarified when given to him that maybe, again, if there's a certain track on there that he might have not played on, and that he was just being given at least this stuff. So I probably would imagine that whenever a tape is at least been made, he's probably given at least a dub of it, or at least a second copy of the tape with the recordings, so he can keep to himself in his at least in a box or whatnot to keep in his home, basically. So I think that's kind of what I get of what was done, what happened with probably with this track on discovering it. Again, Jeff Nichols' son or stepson, Gary Reese, must have definitely found a box full of some of these cassettes with some of these unreleased rehearsals or demos or other sort of studio tracks that never really either was quite finished or they never really made it, and maybe some early versions of certain tracks. So that's how I expect it was done. And he just, again, found the track while playing the second side of this tape, because the tape on the first side was a rehearsal version of Heaven and Hell. But the second side had Slapback, which again was an unreleased track from that was recorded before any of the sessions for Heaven and Hell took place. So it was like one of the first recordings that they did, that Ronnie James Dio did with Black Sabbath, again, that he did. I guess as a way to kind of test out the chemistry with the band, just a way to jam out stuff. And obviously put on the tape, again, maybe for future listening to see whether or not if one of these would be suitable to make it onto a record. That's what, again, bands would do that. They would at least record anything, and whatever they have in mind, they'll record it onto a tape, and again, they'll keep it until they feel like they should come back to it, and maybe revisit it, and maybe think, well, we probably could put this on the next album. This might fit. Who knows? Maybe not. Again, it's basically done there as just ideas, basically. That they're only used as song ideas, so that's why they would record that stuff. Any band did that. Motley Crue did that. Judas Priest probably did that. AC/DC actually did that. They all would do that. Dave Mustaine has apparently done that too. So it's all for future ideas. It's all it's done as. So there. That definitely at least clears that sort of idea, possibly how he got a hold of the track in the first place. But again, Tony Iommi does continue on discussing his just opinions and his thoughts on the whole song being released. And again, he did, after him just going on saying that it's left a really bad taste in his mouth, he goes on and more on and says that at that point, when we did Slapback, Jeff wasn't even involved in the band. I hadn't even gotten Jeff over at the time. So again, Iommi had noted. Again, this is where Tony Iommi's story kind of differs a bit from Geezer Butler's story. And again, to kind of at least to remind you, in Geezer Butler's comments on the song, he stated that it was one of the last songs that he played bass on. All right. Well, now Tony Iommi, when he starts stating about the track, he then states this: that this is actually Ronnie playing bass on that. And that was just in the lounge recorded on a cassette. So the guitarist went on to explain that Slapback was something the group would routinely jam on, but it wasn't right for the album, so we didn't put it into shape. We didn't record it properly or anything. So there, and again, some of this was taken from the quotes of some of this was actually taken from ultimateclassicrock.com. So there you go. So on one hand, I just want we'll take this as Tony Iommi's memory kind of possibly showing its age, or it could be Geezer Butler's memory showing its age. Even though both Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler have definitely have gone on record now and said that Slapback is indeed a Black Sabbath song, which I knew all along when I first heard the song like a week ago or so. So it was obviously sounded like a Black Sabbath track to me due to the guitar tone and so on, because it still had that Never Say Die guitar tone to begin with. But as well, the thing though that, again, why I say memory could be showing its age is just how, on one hand, you got Geezer Butler saying that he played bass on it, and it was one of the last songs that he played on before he briefly left the band. But now you got Tony Iommi saying that Ronnie James Dio was the one playing bass on the track. And he does state that it was recorded in a lounge. So at this point in that sort of information, I don't know what's there on, again, I don't want to really look too much into it and think much of it, but it could just be memory showing its age, but still, it really, Geezer on the other hand has seemed like he has no fucking problem with the song being released, because obviously that was a period in time that Geezer probably wants to at least be somewhat deleted from his memory. In some cases, he doesn't look back fondly on, whereas Tony Iommi on the other hand definitely seems to be the one who's definitely taken a lot of opposing, I guess, to it. He's definitely taken a lot of heart to at least the fact that the track got released. I mean, it would have been something if Gary Reese had contacted Tony Iommi about the track firsthand and said, "Hey, I found a unreleased Black Sabbath track that you recorded with Ronnie James Dio. It was one of the first songs it seemed like you had recorded with him. It's called Slapback. Are you interested in wanting a copy of this song, and would you might be interested in maybe having it with you until maybe when the opportunity is asked about maybe putting out a compilation album of unreleased material. Are you interested?" He could have done that. Gary Reese could have done that with Tony Iommi, and who knows whether or not Tony Iommi's response would have been, "Sure, why not? Give it. It'd be cool. Why not?" So you never know. But Gary Reese obviously decided to think about at least the hardcore or diehard Ronnie James Dio fans. And he thought of them and would be like, this would be a nice treat for them. Because again, it's been a year now. It's been close to 10 years, actually. It's been 10 years since Ronnie James Dio had been passed, since he's been dead. So it was probably as a way to somewhat celebrate still with a nice little unreleased track. I mean, again, it's not an amazing track, but again, it was something to at least give out to at least the diehard fans who obviously are always looking for Sue, or always have in their mind, is there any unreleased stuff with him? It would just be nice to hear something at least else, something different, something new, with, of course, with that voice of Ronnie James Dio. So, you never, that's all they thought about. But again, at the same time, I can also understand where Tony Iommi's coming from. Because again, it would have been nice if it was brought up to him before they did all before Rhino began to do the reissues for Heaven and Hell and the Mob Rules. And maybe this would have been something that would have been at least seen as an interest, and maybe adding as a sweet, sort of nice little bonus, little extra to those reissues to make them really warrant a repurchase in some cases. Again, there's always a possibility, though, now that there could always be at least a unreleased compilation album in mind of just stuff that is filled with some nice little unreleased recordings or so on or whatnot, that of like different versions, alternate versions, whatnot, that could very well be left in a vault somewhere of just stuff that Ronnie James Dio had recorded with Black Sabbath. So there's always that. Again, maybe Wendy Dio has something in mind, on maybe of her doing something that combines a lot of stuff that Ronnie James Dio had possibly recorded with all the bands, like either Elf, Rainbow, Black Sabbath, and maybe his solo band that probably never made it onto at least a cutting room floor or whatnot. So you never know. She might do something like that. You never know. So there you go. There's that. All right. So since I just talked for a bit and at least differed away from the sadness of the beginning and talked about something very interesting, something that I definitely wanted to talk about for sure. So that was cool. Finally, let's now get on to the Q&A segment. Okay. Time to get on to the Q&A segment, and obviously this Q&A segment is brought to you by of course, one of my favorite subscribers, Stormrider. So this is what Stormrider decided to at least bring to me on when it comes to the question. So here's the question that Stormrider has questioned me. So, 1. As usual, here are my questions for the Nasty podcast. So 1, what do you think is the most important year for heavy, with just slightly said there, metal/rock music, and why? 2, what is your favorite year for heavy, metal/rock music, and why? Thank you and take care. Stormrider. Well, thank you for, of course, the question there, Stormrider, and this was sent to me on February 24th, because again, on February 26th, before all the news broke to me and my family, I was slated to do a podcast episode, which would have been number 13 here, but because of that, I had to push it back. So, because again, my mind wasn't in it. Again, I explained why. So to answer these questions, if you were to ask me what do I think is the most important year for heavy, I mean rock music. If I was going for metal music, I mean, of course, a lot of people will then say, well, 1984. Some will say 1986 was a great decade for metal music because of those. That's for thrash metal. That was thrash metal's really peak year, was 1986, and then even 1987 is not too far behind. But for sure, 1986 was the peak year for at least thrash metal. 1984 was really the last peak year for traditional heavy metal in general. It was probably the last year where at least the new wave of British heavy metal was seen somewhat as viable, even though it was kind of on its, it was a little bit dying on its knees for a bit. It was its last leg, because after that, it was becoming more of an afterthought at that point, even though it was becoming an afterthought because of Saxon released Crusader. Def Leppard had already, a year before, had released Pyromania, and of course, Venom releases At War with Satan. And then you had Tigers of Pantang were kind of already done at this point, and whatever incarnation Tigers of Pantang was at this point is irrelevant. And of course, Raven were slowly dipping in. I think the Live at the Inferno album was definitely the end of an era of when they really were just young and hungry. And then, of course, a year later, for sure, Stay Hard came out. Even though that's not a bad album, it just was kind of just almost was seen as more of a so-and-so album than really anything that was a complete departure, even though there were some hints that they were departing from the sound. But there was still plenty of great plenty of great Raven rockers on that album. Even if it wasn't extraordinary great, it still sounded at least like classic Raven in some cases, just not nearly as powerful as it was as they sounded on the first three. Then the Pack is Back, and it kind of killed their reputation. So 1984 in some cases was. I mean, Bloodsport from Avenger is probably one of the best new wave of British heavy metal albums, especially for time of full-length albums. It is definitely one of the best. It's up there with like Loose and Lethal from Savage. So that's why I think, again, and of course Iron Maiden releasing, releasing Power Slave, which is probably one of the last really good Iron Maiden albums. It's the last of the really classic Iron Maiden albums. It's like beginning in 1980 with their debut self-titled album, and then from there, from Killers to Number of the Beast, and then even Peace of Mind, and then Power Slave. It's like that was just those slew of albums from 1980 to 1984 was like, again, to everyone, was like the classic period of Iron Maiden. And after that, nowadays people really hype up, again, stuff like Somewhere in Time and Seventh Son of Seventh Son. But when you really talk to a lot of old school metalheads who grew up in that period, who grew up with hearing Iron Maiden on albums such as Number of the Beast, Killers, Peace of Mind, and Power Slave, and then going back and hearing again the debut album and just being blown away, they were taken back by the sound, and everyone really thought that they were selling out, and there was a departure from that. So many people really were kind of fell off the Iron Maiden bandwagon in some cases. Nowadays, you got a lot of people that really hype up Seventh Son and fucking Somewhere in Time. So again, it was the overly really processed production of Somewhere in Time, and then the really tinny production of Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. And of course, they tried to regain their fan base with No Prayer for the Dying and Fear of the Dark, and it didn't really do much. So it kind of, it really, if you think about it, Iron Maiden didn't really get back their fan base until when Bruce Dickinson came back in 2000 for, of course, Brave New World, is when they regained their fan base. So it was like almost close for 10 years, basically, that they had to regain their fucking fan base again. Close to 10 years or 11 years. It was a long time, because many people kind of fell off that bandwagon. But nowadays, you got a lot of people hopping up those two albums. So it is what it is. But the question, of course, to answer, what do I really think? I guess in some cases, I have to say maybe 1983 or 1984. Because I'm very different on those two, on which year. Even though I actually might give the edge to 83. Because it was probably the last year where heavy metal was just really, I think you really had a lot of bands that really sounded like they were. And as far as the last great year for rock music, I want to say 1980 was probably the last good year for maybe rock music. I mean, some will say 1976 maybe, or 77. But I will say at least 1980. Because of at least the hard rock bands rocked hard at least again in 1980. And then, of course, the whole new wave of British heavy metal movement, the annual BHM. Again, from Saxon, and even Def Leppard's On Through the Night, and Iron Maiden's debut album, and of course Tigers of Pantang, and actually Raven came a year later, but Quartz with Stand Up and Fight, AC/DC with Back in Black, and Motorhead with Ace of Spades. You know, and Scorpions even released Animal Magnetism, and I think that's a good album. I've always liked that album. I think 1980 was probably the last year where I think rock music in general was actually really, was at its, again, it was its last leg. 81 was a decent year for it too, but 1982, 83, and 84, rock music just started becoming too, that's a little too convoluted in terms of the overly produced stuff. Everything began to sound overly produced, and a lot of them just started to venture in other shit. It just, it became a mess in some cases, whereas metal began to grow further into the 1980s. So I think 1983 was probably the peak year for heavy metal, and then 1984 was probably the last year where true heavy metal, at least the traditional stuff, was good. Thrash metal was 1986, so I really can't really give you a decisive year on what was its peak year, but I feel anywhere between 1983 and 84 is, I think, was like its peak years for me. So I hope that answers your first question. So your second question, for me to answer, what do I think is my favorite year for heavy metal? Oh my, I may have to go with... I may have to go with 1983 myself. I have to go with 1983. I know a lot of people then say 1984. There's some great albums. That's probably my second favorite year for heavy metal. But for or just metal in general, I think 1983 is probably the year where I think everything had a great. I mean, there were some great albums that came out in 1983 too. Again, some underrated albums as well. There's just, I think, to me, if you look at albums like Melissa from Merciful Fate, or Stronger Than Evil from Heavy Load, or Dio's Holy Diver, I'll even throw in there again Another Perfect Day from Motorhead, Thunder and Lightning the last album from Thin Lizzy. That's a good album. I definitely consider that one of the best albums for sure. And I know it's not really considered metal. They're not really. Some people do consider them, but that's not the point. But I also love Flick of the Switch from AC/DC. I think that was definitely the last album where they sounded a little raw in some cases. It was a good album from AC/DC there. And again, it kind of it had a way of actually blending in with that stuff in some cases, really blended in. And of course, the new wave of British heavy metal, it was on its last legs, but it gave us a good album, actually, with Loose and Lethal from Savage. And I know it might be overrated in some cases, but I do like it. Power Gains from Jaguar, I don't know, but there's something about that album that I actually really like. So, I know I can go on and on, but there were plenty of good albums that came out in 1983. I know it came out like in December, but fucking Balls to the Wall from Accept. There's just some good albums that came out that year, and I just really can't go wrong. You can't really go wrong with almost some stuff that was released in 1983 or 84, really, but 83 is probably my favorite year for heavy metal, just in general. So there you go. I know that it seems very hipsterish, whatever, I don't fucking care. It's my channel, it's my opinions, whatnot, who gives a shit? Alright, so there you go. I hope that answers both your two questions. So thank you for sending in those questions there, Stormrider. So hopefully next time, for the next podcast episode, which I'll definitely announce when that's going to be upcoming, when I'll record that. So again, thank you. Hopefully you keep sending in questions. I hope all of you do send in questions. Again, if you want to send me any questions that you would love to have me answer on a Q&A segment for these Nasty Metal podcast episodes, I will be on your screen. You'll see where you'll send your questions. That's, of course, at the NastyMetalProductions at gmail.com. Or you can leave them in the comments section below here at the YouTube video channel, whatnot. So there you go. There's your two options. NastyMetalProductions at gmail.com or in the comments section here. So there's your two options if you want to send in questions for me to answer on these Nasty Metal podcast episodes as part of the Q&A segment. So that ends the Q&A segment for episode number 13 of the Nasty Metal podcast. All right. So what's up next? You know what? I need to get in some wrestling talk, and I got a few things I should talk about. Whoo! You know, I almost was going to feel really happy about professional wrestling this week in some cases, and I was going to talk about some things also, because of when I was planning, when this was originally planned, I was going to talk about how I'm so fucking happy that one of my favorite wrestlers here in the modern times is now gone to WWE and is on NXT. I don't really consider it the developmental brand because the fact that it's on cable TV and it's being broadcast to at least the whole world, especially across the United States, and it isn't really on the network anymore. Even though it is, they upload the episodes just a day or so after it has been aired on TV. In some cases, it means it's to me, that's no longer a developmental program because it's being broadcasted to a whole world, basically. So, developmental program to me would be something that's low key, that isn't completely, at least broadcasted. Something that's, again, OVW, which was seen as a developmental program, which was the stuff that Jim Cornette and Danny Davis, who actually was the one that ran that company, that was on local TV and either, oh God, I forgot where it was. It was like either, wasn't Florida, but it was somewhere around there. It wasn't Florida. I'm fucking that one up there. But again, it was broadcasted there, and I think even in Louisville, Kentucky, or so on. Or I'm confusing that with Jim Cornette's other wrestling company, Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Still, that you would consider developmental because of it was seen on a very small basis. It was seen by a small group of people in terms of as far as viewership. Whereas NXT is actually being seen by a much wider, more bigger audience and viewership. So it's no longer. They're seen on TV. It's basically they're almost basically part of the roster. It's a part of the main roster at this point. It doesn't matter what anyone says. It's a part of it. They're seen there. It's a third show for WWE, basically. It's a third show. All right, so kind of almost seen as like WWE's version of ECW. But again, I'm happy. I was happy that he's there. And I do have some disappointments. Because here's one of my favorite fucking guys. I loved seeing him on NWA in the NWA Power Series, which now it's no longer on YouTube. It's now getting all moved to Fight TV because they did it because Billy Corgan, who of course of the Smashing Pumpkins, who was owned the NWA company and the brand since at least since the late 2010s, like 2017, I believe. And he's now done a deal with Fight TV, and they deleted their entire videos basically on YouTube, and now it's going to move to Fight TV. Even though it's $5 a month, though, for Fight TV, it's really not too bad, even though it was kind of really cool that it was free in a way, because if you're able to access it any day of the week, basically, to just watch those episodes. And it had a great guys, some guys that were once in the WWF/WWE, and then of course either TNA, now Impact Wrestling. You know, TNA was pretty much Vince Russo's company. It was basically his. Still, that there. So it was nice. It was again a throwback to the old wrestling style of the 1980s, basically. At least the studio wrestling, again, like the old World Championship Wrestling of NWA on TBS or ESPN, or stuff like maybe Mid-South or / UWF, that kind of stuff, or Memphis stuff. You know, it was like that kind of throwback to that kind of period of the early 80s to at least mid or late 80s. JCP Productions, of course, just should mention, rest in peace, Jim Crockett Jr. Obviously, even though Vince McMahon may have had more of the money and had more of the resources to expand further, which also meant destroying the territories in the 1980s, still, if anyone, Jim Crockett Jr. was one who had the mind and the overall feel for the business of wrestling in general. And, I mean, how would have anyone would have seen Ric Flair or Dusty Rhodes on a more bigger scale if it wasn't for Jim Crockett Jr. and his business with JCP and working with the NWA? So there you go. All right. So that again, the end back to, of course, NWA Power and Eli Drake. Now, and I'll get to my disappointments. Again, it was great. He was one of my favorites. I love his promos. I love this fucking look. I like that he wrestled. He was a pretty good wrestler in the ring. Had some good stuff with him. He just had personality. Yeah, there might be some similarities to him and Steve Austin in terms of it, even though he reminds me of more like stunning Steve Austin than Stone Cold Steve Austin. But he just talked the same. The cadence was almost the same. He just, again, it was a great personality. In some cases, he would have fit right in with the old wrestling stuff of the earlier mid 80s. He just had that feel. It just a great talker, great personality, and I just liked him a lot. And so the fact that he went to WWE, I was like, oh shit, he's there. I couldn't believe it. But my disappointment with his run here, even though I'm trying to get used to it, because again, it could be another Steve Austin situation with the WWE. It could be another situation because of I'll get to it here. They have to always do a name change. They always have to change a name. I think it's why I will end up agreeing with guys like Jim Cornette on how stupid it is to go on and give somebody a gimmick or a new name or whatnot, and not just bring them in as again the person that everyone at least recognized as. They have to always do a fucking name change, and it's always gonna be something a little goofy. And that's what they did with Eli Drake. They gave him a name named LA Knight. I'm like, fuck. Even though he's a hell of a talker, and he's got the same personality, which is at least something I'm at least somewhat happy about. But I don't care for the music, the theme music that got him going for him. I don't really care for the fucking name. It's like, well, yes, it rhymes with Eli Drake because he does that little shtick and he still has his phrases. But at the same time, it's just like, how is anybody supposed to be taken serious or at least be able to get over on themselves if you're just going to change their fucking name? I mean, if it was one thing, if you're going to say LA Knight, Sean Ricker, or the LA Knight Eli Drake. Okay, it's a name, but at least there's at least still his actual name at the end of it. Again, like Dr. Death, Steve Williams, Stone Cold, Steve Austin, or Stunning, Steve Austin. There's always at least a little bit of a Sonoma name in front of their actual name, but it's wrestling. You expect those kind of names. It makes them, again, Roddy Piper. Fuck. But just LA Knight? Are you fucking kidding me? Stupid. I'm sorry. So, but at least he's able to talk. And as far as that, I don't know if I really think it's a great idea to put him in a feud right now, at least as his first feud with a very big looking guy like Bronson Reed, who's, again, very, very... He's not the buffest guy, but he's a big guy. He's very round. I guess he's a very big-sized kind of guy. But I don't know if it's a good idea. I mean, there could be something of it. I don't know how they're going to pull it off. I just think, why would you do that? Because of it makes you think, shit, they're gonna have him lose on his debut, at least in a match. They're gonna have him lose on a pay-per-view. Why? Are you going to get, if you can't, why? Everyone who comes in on their debut should be able to have a win. If you think somebody is going to be at least a future somebody, have them win on some debuts. On their debut, have them win some matches. Have them at least in a decent view where they're able to win, especially with somebody who's already been there for a long time and has their time in the sun. Have them go over that. Why has to be with at least still a relatively up-and-coming guy like Bronson Reed? I don't know if that's a good idea, and I don't know if I like. Again, if I like that. Again, it would have made sense if you're putting Eli Drake in a feud with, let's say, Tommaso Ciampa. Tommaso Ciampa's been in at least wrestling for close to 15 years or whatnot. I've seen him when he was in Ring of Honor back in 2014 or 13. And I was a fan of him there. And again, I like this Sicilian psychopath. But he's been wrestling for quite a while now. He's already had his bigger times. He's seen bigger days on NXT. So I think if anyone, you should have probably tried to put Eli, at least I'm still going to call him Eli Drake. I'm sorry. I'm going to call him Eli Drake. You should put him in a feud with him and then have him get a win over that. In some cases, Tommaso Ciampa is now putting over a new guy now. And he's still new. Because of, I don't know how many people that watch NXT actually watch the NWA Power Show, even though I liked it. And I still think that there are still plenty of people who knew who he was, especially when he was even in Impact Wrestling. So, there you go. Then again, that's Impact Wrestling, which Jim Cornette refers to as witness protection, basically. Because of it's barely watched. It's why why the minute it left Spike TV, it's why it couldn't keep any decent viewership on whatever channel it went on. It went to then Pop, then it went to, oh god, it went to the fucking what was it? Not the Outdoor Channel, but it went to one of those like the Hunting Channel or something. It went to there, and it was once again, because again, wrestling is always synonymous with a lot of the South people, the Southern people. So they decide, oh, this is a great fit, whatever. And now it's on Access TV, which is pretty much just a free TV channel when you purchase DirecTV. So it's like giving you the free. You're not really getting it, and it barely breaks, even though AEW is doing their best to do that. Which then probably now brings me to that, because again, while I'm happy, at least I'm going to give it I'm trying to give it as much of a chance as possible with Eli Drake and WWE on NXT. But it's time to now go to AEW. Where do I fucking start? Even though this was a company I was liking from the beginning, but now I don't know what's going on with half the time. And now I think that is Tony Khan on purposely trying to get people to now hate his fucking company. Here's a guy who did everything he could to go and say, oh, I'm not going to be like Vince McMahon. I'm not Vince McMahon. I'm going to care about the fans. I'm going to do everything. I'm going to bring everyone what they were so desired to see on WWE and were failed when given. I'm going to give them what they were asking for. Now I've been questioning that after fucking Revolution, which is their second annual. It's their second annual Revolution pay-per-view. Debuted when they back in March of last year, when fans are still able to at least to be held in at a full capacity in the world before the pandemic got any worse. So it was good. But now it's their second one, and there was very little capacity. There was still some fans. They're letting in some fans. They're actually, again, letting in some fans, and other than Impact or WWE, or not really, even though they are trying to tell you that they got audiences, even though it's probably just the, enhancement talent. Still, they're trying to give you the idea that you got fans there. And then their Thunderdome with all the digitalized faces that are being streamed across the world, make it seem like they got a packed crowd. Whatever. But fucking AEW does, they're letting at least a few couple of fans, and whatever they did at the end, having the fans there, it wouldn't have added. It obviously, having the fans, if they didn't have them, we wouldn't have had that reaction. So they were basically for their pretty big program for the World Championship, which is Kenny Omega holding it after screwing Jon Moxley / Dean Ambrose out of it with Don Callis, who is at least the president of Impact Wrestling, and is, of course, it is why they're doing the partnership, why there's between Impact Wrestling and AEW. Well, he's been, again, longtime friend of and somewhat mentor of Kenny Omega, because apparently Kenny Omega's father helped train Don Callis in Canada, even though some people are trying to find validity in that. Jim Cornette. Still though, they're pulling they're trying to continue the feud, and they did, and they were going to do the blow off match at AEW Revolution. And it was announced on episodes a few weeks ago that it was going to be that the rematch for the world title is going to be inside, or at least held in a stipulation match, which is a exploding barbed wire death match. Which of course, after showing all, again, if you're not familiar with what that match is, then you must have not been completely familiar with, of course, maybe for reason, with the stuff in Japan. Like FMW. The very first exploder was actually titled an exploding barbed wire time bomb or no rope match. So, and the first match was between Anita and Funk. And yes, Terry Funk. And it was in was it 94, 93? It was one of those years. And the whole point of the match is the ropes are replaced with barbed wire, but the thing is, there's some somewhat tiny explosives that are at least basically effects, whatever, that are tacked onto the barbed wire, and every time someone pushes you, or at least you hit those barbed wires, it triggers the explosion. It will trigger it, like basically a puff of smoke or whatnot. And again, the rest are supposed to at least to sell it like he just got hit in the back by an explosion or whatnot, by a little tiny bomb. So there's that. And then, of course, there's some things running around the ring. But the thing is, the why it's called also was somewhat called the time bomb match is because of there's a timer on it. And by the time it hits at least the minute the timer goes off and it hits and it's done with, it will trigger a big giant explosion. Like again, that it's been placed around the rings and even on the turnbuckle, at least the turn posts. It will trigger an entire explosion. Basically, why they call it the time bomb match. So all the footage that they've been showing everyone from Japan, they were like, oh my god, we're going to be seeing something absolutely crazy and ridiculous, and it's going to end in a big giant fucking explosion, basically. Even though technically no one really gets killed in the ring, still, it's a giant fucking explosion, and it's all made like a goddamn mushroom cloud, even though it's smoke, fire, just all sorts of shit. All things that's supposed to be exciting. Well, when it came to the match, and while AEW didn't really replace the ropes with barbed wire, they at least put barbed wire around the ropes. They wrapped the barbed wire around the ropes with, of course, with the little bombs, whatever. They got at least attached to the barbed wire. But there's one, but the side of the ring that at least is focusing the entranceway is not wrapped in barbed wire because they have to get through it. Even though if you watch the very first barbed wire death or exploding barbed wire death match between Funk and Onita, they will crawl under the fucking ring. So they found their ways to get into the ring if they did it that way. But still, they did it. It was a fine match for what it was beginning. I mean, of course, it wasn't a technical wrestling masterpiece by any means, but it was a fine match for what it was. But by the time it hit the end, of course, Omega retains it by having his friends, the Good Brothers, who were known as Gallows and Anderson in WWE. They were also part of the Bullet Club in Japan. So they came in and they beat up Moxley. They apparently made a bat or so that's wrapped in barbed wire, but it's got a little bomb on it too, and they went and hit it to him. So they did also, again, Jim Cornette pretty much found this as hokey as shit. And it is, even though it's supposed to be somewhat entertaining. But again, the problem is, again, the underselling of some of the stuff. And the numerous near falls. So again, finally, it took Kenny Omega to hit Jon Moxley with the one-wigged angel onto a fucking chair, and then 1, 2, 3. But then the timer still goes off. The timer still has to go off, even though if you watch the first ever exploding barbed wire death match between Funk and Onita, they went into before Onita pinned Funk, they did it to at least where the bomb was where the timer was going off. It was near when the timer was going off when the pin was made. But in AEW's version of the match, they pinned him before the timer was even ever to go off. So they had to really set the timer off because they promised the whole fan, at least whoever that was there in attendance, they were going to get something crazy. You were going to get something that you obviously paid money for. So you're going to get it. And especially for the people who paid for pay-per-view. All right? The $60. They wanted to. Finally, though, when it happened, they handcuff Moxley. They leave him in the ring. And then here comes Eddie Kingston, who had just been in a pretty decent feud, I would say, even though it wasn't a very long-lasting feud. But it was a good enough feud with Moxley. He's now, he's somewhat has a change of heart. He's trying to save him. They couldn't. He tried. He couldn't get the handcuffs off in time for the timer. So he basically ducks for cover. He basically covers Moxley like he's in battle, whatever, like a sacrifice, basically. Finally, when the bombs hit, the explosion. Talk about 4th of July. And it's already been ridiculed. It wasn't the big explosion that people were seeing on those old Japanese tapes. It wasn't. No, the footage. It wasn't seen as that. Instead, it was sparklers and a puff of smoke. It wasn't a giant fucking explosion, whatnot. And it killed it. Everyone booed. That's why I'm like, is Tony Khan on purposely trying to get people to now hate his product? And I think it kind of did a number in the ratings for their episode, which they tried to explain it. They're now making it a part of the storyline that maybe that Don Callis built a shitty fucking reign. They built it shitty. Again, Eddie Kingston throwing shade and saying that it was Impact that paid for that paid for it. They obviously didn't, and nothing really went in the plan. Even though it's being called a botch, it was a botched explosion because it wasn't even much of an explosion. It was just it was 4th of July sparklers, basically. It's stuff you probably would have found at goddamn Dollar Tree. It was an absolute disaster, and I think in some cases it's really beginning to kill the momentum, and they tried to save it with at least to get back some of that, to at least in the audience, by having finally MJF to leave the Inner Circle and basically start his own, basically align himself with FTR, Tully Blanchard, and Sean Spears, and basically create almost a horseman-like stable, even though MJF had his horseman-like stable. It was the Dynasty in MLW, and which was Alexander Hammerstone and Richard Holiday. They were a great fucking team, and then Gino Medina was also in that team. And it was a decent enough team. Actually, again, a lot of personality, a lot of again, just great stuff, a lot of chemistry. I don't know. Again, it's up in the air what that's going to turn out, but they beat the fuck out of the Inner Circle and Jericho and so on by either smashing a glass over Hager's head, handcuffing both the two former LAX members, Santino and Ortiz. They went and handcuffed them, beat the shit out of Sammy Guevara, and basically just bloodied the fuck out of some of them. And it was probably a way to somewhat apologize for the botched bullshit of that ending. And then, of course, and the thing is, it was the debut of former WWE wrestler Christian Cage, who had just showed up at the Royal Rumble, and it was probably done as a way to, as a sign-off, because he was debuting in AEW to become a full-time wrestler again. So many ways, all the stuff they're doing, it's like they're signing a lot of bigger name guys who made a name in like either WCW or WWE/WWF. They're signing these guys, but at the same time, they're not also they're really falling back on all the promises that they made in terms of trying to give the fans in terms of what you're going to expect, if anything. Like, again, the botch explosion in their version of the exploding barbed wire death match, which was a staple in Japan in the 90s. So they fucked a lot of it up in some cases, and they're trying to gain it back, but again, they're more focusing on signing other talent, newer talent, overbooking their roster instead of actually trying to do something with their product in general. It's a little bit of a mess in some cases. I'm trying to still soldier on and like it because, again, I had to tune off the fucking Monday Night Raw after the whatever they did with the I don't know why. I don't think anybody was ever asking for another rematch between Drew McIntyre and Sheamus, even though I like those two, especially McIntyre. But they just had a match a week before, and it was it ended in a good enough on a at least there's a definitive ending. It ended again. Drew McIntyre picked up a win over Sheamus in a clean way, and there was nothing in that match that made me think, oh, Sheamus is going to enact revenge on Drew McIntyre. Well, I don't know why they had to do that. It made no sense. Because again, I thought it was done. It was a way to end off their feud. Now they had to fucking redo it. And because of it, it was a great opening match between Drew McIntyre and Sheamus. They had to try and do another rematch in a fucking no disqualification match, which Jim Cornette would say, shitty booking. So they had to, and it ends in both these two men who, I mean, they fucking tore each other up. They actually, they legitimately had bad scratches on their backs, but, which again, to sell it. So they had some, again, it looked physical. They did everything they could to sell it like they was having physical, but the ending fucked it all up and pissed me off, and I had to change the channel because of why? Why would you then have your two guys just pick up two of the steel steps and just ram into each other like a fucking head-on collision on the road and fucking fall down? I mean, yeah, it looked, I don't know, something about just, it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. And I was just like, this is what we're ending this, and now they're stopping the match, even though it's no disqualification, and whatever. It just like, oh, they can't continue, we gotta stop the match. And I'm like, didn't we see both fucking Sheamus and Drew McIntyre beat the crap out of each other in an elimination chamber? Mow through 4 other fucking guys in a cage. Sheamus also beaten Jeff Hardy up in a fucking cinematic match that took place in a bar. They beat the crap out of each other. And yet this right here, this fucking way you're ending the match on, this is how this was too much. I don't know. It actually kind of, I didn't like it. Here's a company who tries to say, oh, we're all entertainment. We're basically are just a TV show. Nothing's real. Nothing really isn't. When you go and do this, what are you trying? What kind of message are you sending to your fucking people? Are you trying to be believable? Or are you trying to be at least somewhat, I don't want to say unbelievable, but just, I don't know, fake? You're trying you're giving out mixed messages and you're doing that. I don't know. So I changed the channel and I went and watched something else. And I went on to watch my brother's stream on SiteTube. So I was like, fuck this. I'll be back next week, though, to see whatever they're trying to at least I don't know, to follow up on that. But I'm like, nothing was there that warranted a rematch. It was stupid. So they're just trying to continue a feud because of they can't come up with anything else. And now it's been come out that they are now back to square one with WrestleMania 37. They don't know what else to do with it. They've got the main event matches booked, but they have nothing else booked. They're back to square one. What the fuck? I'm starting to get a little cornetish here a bit because of I don't know what the fuck they're doing now. So there you go. There's my wrestling talk. All right, so let's definitely move on. Finally, to end this episode, time for a Bandcamp plug. If you're all again, I'm going to plug in my Bandcamp page again. If you want to keep up with my musical stuff that I do, again, you can go to, of course, my Bandcamp pages for Winghead and Ex Morta, and you can purchase the downloads for at least $10 or $10.99. You can purchase them. You're $10. You can purchase them. Again, if you want to. It would be nice. It'd be nice. But still, that's only if your guys are into digital stuff. I'm hoping to get some physical stuff, but not really yet. I don't know what's going on there. Still, it'd be nice. So, again, you got some deals, whatever. If you want to download all that, again, you can go to those two and check them out. I hope all of you. There might be something else coming out this year on the Winghead side of things. Expect that to come. So, there you go. So there we go. That's it for, of course, the Nasty Metal Podcast, episode number 13. Hope all of you enjoyed this one. I hope you were able to at least to stay with me during this episode. So with that, the next Nasty Metal Podcast episode, which will be episode number 14, will be recorded at least within 2 weeks. At least, it will be within 2 weeks on March 26th, and it'll be out on the 27th. So there you go. That's it. Hope all of you enjoyed it. This is for Threshold Sam out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone. Have a nice fucking weekend. Take care.